From VQR and the Center for Media and Citizenship, this is episode 4 of Circle of Willis, where neuroscientist Wil Cunningham and I discuss the beauty of complexity and the unconscious processes that shape our conscious motivations. You know you want to listen, but you probably don't know why. Hey everyone, it's Jim Cohn. This is my podcast, Circle of Willis. I guess I want to start with a few questions for this episode. So here goes. First, what's an emotion? And how do our memories shape and inform our preferences? How are our experiences and behaviors influenced by our goals? And at the end of the day, why are we so saddled with all these stereotypes and prejudices? I bring these questions up because this episode's guest, Wil Cunningham, has received actually numerous awards for his groundbreaking research addressing each of these questions, all from the perspective of brain structure and function. Because he's a neuroscientist at the University of Toronto, where he's specifically a professor of psychology and also has an appointment at the Rotman School of Management. One of the funny things about this particular conversation is that Wil and I don't actually talk all that much about his specific research. For that, I guess I'll have to have him back for another chat. But don't worry, because instead, Wil and I get into a really high-level, sort of abstract conversation almost right away, discussing, among many other things, Wil's love of complexity, the aesthetics of data analysis, even what it might feel like to discover that ESP was real. Something, by the way, that neither of us think is a possibility. Although we don't spend a lot of time getting into Wil's work specifically, our interview satisfies a number of my goals for this podcast anyway. Not least, sort of capturing what a conversation with Wil is really like. I mean, he's someone who's genuinely in love with complexity. This is a guy who likes to be challenged with philosophical puzzles, and it's a lot of fun to think out loud with him. And anyway, though understanding Wil's work isn't always easy, once you start to understand his process, and that's what this interview really gives you access to, sort of the way his mind works, you start to see how he's been able to unpack some of our most mundane experiences in his research to reveal really just how sophisticated and complex our minds really are. And as he says somewhere in here, our conscious experience of just about anything is the end result of really thousands of processes going on outside of our awareness. And I think that's pretty cool. And speaking of cool, in this conversation, we also get to learn a little bit about Wil's life, his adult life, anyway. How his interests led him towards science in general, and chance tipped him towards psychology in particular, and then how neuroscience captured his heart in graduate school. But here's my favorite part, really. This recorded conversation sort of captures in real time Wil and I moving from sort of, pretty good friends and colleagues to close friends, sort of going up a notch in our relationship. Sounds funny to say, but it's true. I would say we were good friends. We were pretty good friends and certainly good colleagues before this day where I asked him to come and participate in this recording session. And during this day, we sort of took it up a level, got to know each other a lot better. And this particular interview sort of captures that process, our process of opening up more about things that have happened to us, things we've done, things we're interested in, all that. So, I love this recording for all kinds of reasons, but that last reason probably tops the list. And anyway, I'm happy to share that with you. So, folks, open your minds now, because you got to get your thinking caps on with this conversation with Wil Cunningham. You gotta focus now because here's Wil Cunningham. So you're on sabbatical right now.
Yes.
And what are you doing with your sabbatical?
Actually, I spent the first half of my sabbatical teaching graduate stats.
Sucks, dude.
Yeah.
That's a bad sabbatical.
Yeah.
Like.
Two search committees.
It's a dumb idea.
And the scanner committee. Liz Page Gould actually came by a few weeks ago. I think with, I believe, an intervention, informed me that I am doing
God
this quite
her.
Poorly, and I think that she may be grumpy if I reappear. So I really just started probably last week with this actually trip to UVA. So primarily just visiting friends, visiting smart people, and hopefully doing
smart stuff
with
so
smart
unlike
people.
You, Will.
Well, I'm a parasite, right? Sure. I'll feed upon your energy.
Oh, okay. I'll do my best. I've it's funny because my voice is all messed up right now. I have a cold. Of course. So how, there was this interesting, I did an interview with John Allen a few weeks ago, and one of the questions was asked actually by Bethany Teachman. I'm gonna invoke her question for the second time.
Okay, I'm curious why you grab that key there.
I don't know why that's here.
It was kind of beautiful. You had this very dramatic moment. I'm going to invoke Bethany Teachman, and you picked up a key. And I picked up a key because it doesn't symbolize anything. I was just like, why is that here? And I compulsively tied it. So her question was, after we were talking about frontal EEG asymmetry, she's like, how do I describe this to my grandmother? It really struck me because I struggle with that all the time. My own family doesn't really have any idea what I'm doing a lot of the time. And so, they're like, well, they ask the reasonable question, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. So I get to just get tongue tied. Well, I study the brain. Well, what about them? So how do you describe what you do to your grandma? Oh, it's funny. Probably using the same words I'd used to say to you, and she'd probably look at me funny.
I didn't say you did a good job.
No. I'm probably quite terrible at this. Actually, Jay Van Bavel oftentimes says that people come to him and ask, do you have any idea what Will's talking about? So I'm convinced that perhaps...
I wasn't going to say anything.
Yeah, clearly.
Jay's already gotten there. But when I think about you, I think of you as a cognitive neuroscientist probably first.
Yeah.
But also a statistician, a programmer. You're a big part of the world of emotion research, sort of broadly construed.
Well, I think it all comes down to the fact that I'm not quite sure why anything is anything at some level. We got that got very deep very quickly. So apparently, or mysteriously.
Mm-hmm.
Well, luckily you're a trained clinical psychologist. We can have the therapy on the couch later.
I got you covered. Yeah,
at some level, I think that as a psychologist and I guess as a person, there's a belief that the world, there's a desire for the world to be a little more mysterious, right, than it actually is. But I just really want to believe at some level, at a metaphysical level, that there's more than kind of the everyday simple explanations for things, right? That the categories that we use to explain behavior or the way that we think about things, this is why I was loving the emotion research now, where some people argue that emotions might not even exist, right? They might just simply be aspects of ongoing conscious experience that we label emotion.
Right.
And
clusters of phenomena we call
exactly and
a thing.
And I think that that's where things get interesting, because it's a way of kind of re-articulating what seems like mundane experience into ways that at least we can pretend are not mundane. they're probably equally mundane. But
the thing is about that's really striking. It's very Wil Cunningham. is that many people the desire is to find some way to make complex phenomena more simple to understand, and this sort of Occam's razor. And you're like hell with Occam's razor. I want bring on the complexity. I think about this oftentimes. You definitely don't shy away from that complexity.
Oh, not in the slightest.
No, you dive right in.
So, whenever I see these psychology talks, right? Where someone says, what's the cause of empathy? Or, is political orientation caused by A or B?
Yeah.
Right? And you look at these like one variable models, and it just seems like my everyday experience isn't caused by a single variable. So I think that partly my interest in the complexity is simply trying to kind of move up the level of analysis to be slightly more complex. I don't think that the level of analysis that I think about or the way that I think about things necessarily is the correct way. I mean, there are people who are molecular biologists that are going to think that my level of resolution is ridiculously oversimplified.
Yep.
So I just think that we need lots of people studying things at different levels of resolution, kind of keeping us all in check. Oftentimes, I like to be reminded that you don't need to explain a phenomenon with a 17-way interaction, right? If a 2x2 gets you most of the way. So I think science needs all people at all levels of resolution. And I think that I just tend to enjoy thinking about the complexity of things. I am very dissatisfied with very simple A causes B explanations. And my guess is that's probably something more dispositional, right, rather than being something having to do with a specific way of approaching science.
So on the one hand, there's sort of a lack of fear of that complexity, but also an appreciation of it. I mean, it brings up another thing that I know that I can talk with you about, but not everybody, which is there's an aesthetic element oftentimes for me in the data analysis, in the models, the conceptual models I put. Sometimes it's beautiful. Well, sometimes it's not as beautiful.
Well, I like the fact you used the word beautiful, and I'm probably going to completely butcher this, but you basically said that the purpose of this interview is to get you to say things that
I want you to say stuff you're going to regret later.
Entirely regret.
Yeah,
and when
that's my goal.
Yeah. Oh, this is going to be it, or among them. When I read Brian Greene's book, right, The Elegant Universe, what I liked about the way that he presented, talking about things like string theory, there was a sense in reading his book that he was getting more and more complicated, right? You have these very simple ways of thinking about particles and waves, and suddenly he's talking about these strings vibrating in 11 dimensions or whatever it is, right? And I believe it is 11 dimensions.
Oh my God, help me.
And some of them are all wrapped up smaller in on each other, and I have no idea. I'm not a physicist, right. But it seemed compelling. But what I liked about it was that he kind of pulled things apart, and it got more and more complex, and then suddenly it seemed like terms started canceling. Right, by pulling it out in a more and more complex way, he was able to find an elegant kind of solution that almost like simplicity starts reemerging again once you've actually pulled it apart. And so I don't think the goal I necessarily have is for things to be complicated, but maybe it takes pulling things apart to actually find the right number of few components that more accurately represents things.
I mean, there are statistical approaches to doing things like this, like the sort of stepwise regression. But I think you're talking about something related, but maybe it's slightly different, which is it's that elegance idea, explanation.
Right. I think that what I like about some of these approaches is the realization that, like you said, use stepwise regression, right?
Yeah.
You measure variables, and you assume that the numbers we've attached to these categories are the variables of interest.
Yeah.
Right. I think what's interesting about pulling things apart is you might realize that the variables that we're using aren't the right ones, right? So you throw fear into your model, right? So fear becomes a predictor of, say, arousal or fear of vigilance.
Yeah.
But that presupposes that fear is actually the variable of interest as opposed to some component of the thing that we label fear.
Yeah.
Right? And it takes pulling apart the complexity to start seeing what the component pieces are to find these causal relationships. So you're thinking about things like alchemy, right, versus what you consider to be modern chemistry or kind of modern physics.
Yeah.
Right? That for a period of time, you're thinking about what the building blocks of terrestrial matter are.
Yeah.
And they were very labeled things that we'd had in our had words for some time, and you were trying to integrate all of that together.
Right.
How much fire and air is in gold.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't until reconceptualizing the idea of matter, right, and getting something like the periodic table of elements.
Yep.
Right, we start thinking about electrons and
similar process of thought, but different
constituents entirely.
Exactly. And suddenly you start to see all of the relationships, right? What's the relationship between, say, gold and iron and hydrogen and helium? And how do you integrate that to, say, get water or chair?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that really, things like chemistry are probably the type of field it is right now with its rigor and its, pretty high variance explained.
Yeah.
Right? Because of conceptualizing the building blocks at the right level of resolution. And we're in psychology because we're studying the mind, that we're trapped with the words that we've had for thousands or tens of thousands of years.
Yep.
Perception, emotion, cognition, fear, disgust, perception, memory, right? Attention, right? These are all things that seem very real to us, and so we want to know, how much of prejudice is how much attention and how much, memory.
Yep.
Right? And perhaps we're going to get the kind of parsimonious elegance if we stop talking about things in these emergent states. So the same way that you just said, like fear is an emergent state. Perhaps all of these things are emergent states, and we're being hindered in some ways by having a scientific language that also matches the lay language. Right?
Yeah.
Perhaps it's useful to have words that don't correspond to everyday experience. Right, that end up being the building blocks that integrate into things that map onto everyday experience. Right, I see complexity as a temporary state that's necessary for the correct parsimony.
Well, and I wonder if complexity is also a little bit of a state of mind as you're working through a problem. So as you move through a problem and you realize there are more parameters in play than you maybe thought or hoped, that it starts to feel very complex indeed. But as you come to understand it, and to really deeply understand it, the same level of on paper complexity feels less complex. It feels more elegant instead of complex. It's almost like there's a valuation to the two terms.
Right, and especially if we're trying, like you were talking about neuroscience, right, in psychology, if we're mapping cortex, right, into psychological processes.
Oh, God.
Right, the probability that Darwin gave us a brain that corresponds to a thesaurus, right, is pretty unlikely.
Yeah, and I've often thought of it in terms of the difference between what you could sort of call neural constructs and verbal or psychological constructs, and there's very, very little chance that there's a strong mapping of one onto the other.
Now, that said, there's certain things that I really hope I'm wrong on.
Is this one of them?
Wouldn't it be really cool, right, if the brain really was organized, right, like a textbook? I don't think it is in the slightest, and I would bet
I
so
doubt
much on
very
that.
much. I mean, I think the story's gonna be a lot more about white matter than gray matter than we've really appreciated.
Yeah. So I have a question for you on this concept.
Oh shit.
Okay. So when Bem's paper came out,
which one?
The ESP one.
The latest ESP one?
Oh, I don't.
He did one in 1991 too. That was
the JPS
just
one that came
bad.
out. Well, the also thing has. Okay,
you I just answer your question.
No.
Okay, what?
Is there part of you just wanted it to be true?
In 2011, the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, or JPSP as we like to call it, one of psychology's most prestigious journals, published an article by Daryl Bem entitled "Feeling the Future: Experimental Evidence for Anomalous Retroactive Influences on Cognition and Affect." Now, this article reported on 9 experiments apparently showing evidence for precognition and premonition. It's a long story, but I thought at the time, and I still think, that the paper really shouldn't have been published, at least not in JPSB. I'm not really sure whether Wil holds that view, but anyway, in the exchange that follows, he challenges me to consider how I'd feel if ESP were discovered to be real. All right, back to our conversation.
If Bem publishes that study, he's not challenging anything in psychology. He's challenging things in physics.
And
I was like, that's, come on, forget it.
Right. So that's
So
that's what I get at, right?
Okay.
I agree with you. You read those studies; they're clearly, not right. But I'm thinking the back of your the back of your brain, like that's a place.
It is. I'll call the
in your
my occipital lobe, the back.
Was there some place where there's like, wouldn't it be cool if psychology was able to show ESP? And this is what I'm saying about like this, the mystery, kind of like something kind of magical.
Yeah.
As a science that we could find.
So I guess what I was trying to say is that I don't think it's possible for psychology to show that there's ESP, because it involves physical properties that would require a physicist.
Sure.
I mean, at least at the mechanism level.
Okay.
So in that sense, until there's a physicist mapping out the mechanism, the simplest explanation, the most parsimonious explanation to me is that something went wrong and we don't know what it is yet.
Okay, so now I want to push this a little bit farther then.
Okay.
I guess I'm interviewing you now.
I guess so. Shit. and I have so many other things I would need to talk to about.
I'll get off this soon then.
Okay.
So at lunch we were talking about the talking dog.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
I bring in Rover.
Yeah.
Rover's like, hey, Jim, how's life?
Yeah.
Can you get me milk bone?
Yeah.
Right? And you're like, clearly.
I say, yeah, get you milk bone.
Yeah. Clearly this is a talking dog.
Yeah.
Right? So suppose I bring you, instead of like Rover the dog, like, Rover the ESP genius, right?
Yeah.
And he's like literally like just reading your mind.
Yeah.
Right?
Like so subjectively I'm thinking of this color or that visual scene, and he's just telling me what I'm thinking.
He knows what you're having for dinner later tonight.
Yeah.
Okay. So
that'd freak me out.
That would freak you out.
Yeah.
You probably wouldn't need the physicist
to believe the
phenomenon.
I'd want him to do it with other people, and I'd want them to be as self-doubting as me.
Oh, sure.
Okay, so all of these are
oh, yeah, always. Okay. So now psychology has now done something where physics says this is entirely impossible. But here's, I guess we shouldn't call him Rover, but
right, here's Rover. Here's Rover,
yeah,
the ESP guy.
The ESP dog.
Yeah.
The talks.
That talks. Because I said, just for backstory, I said no dogs can talk, and you come to me with Rover.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Go, shit,
and not only can he talk, he can also have ESP.
Yeah.
Right. No, and I mean,
might as well.
And so, wouldn't that be fascinating? Again, I don't think this would ever happen, but if psychology could do that, that'd be kind of cool.
If psychology could do that, if that happened, that would be. The analogy is for me. People have often asked me whether I believe in ghosts, and. Because when I was, it happens to be the case that when I was a little kid, I was terrified of ghosts, and I had sleep problems actually for a while when I was like, in my early teens, because I was afraid that ghost was gonna, and then now I cannot make contact with that person at all, because I'm like, if I had any shred of evidence of no matter how tenuous that made me doubt the end of my existence after I die, I would love that.
I see we're heading towards belief in God here, aren't we?
Yeah, no, not me. Because because I have sort of concluded that evidence is just not forthcoming, and it's not likely to be. So in the sense that I would love to find real evidence of a ghost, I guess I would love to find real evidence of something like ESP, but I would have loved it more 10 years ago, before I've been through enough iterations of disappointment. Because now I'm like, I don't even want to entertain it, because but interesting, maybe it's that level of disappointment that betrays my desire for that stuff to be true.
Yeah, the reason why I'm asking this is I think there's a link between what we were talking about earlier in this, right? Which is, if we want psychology to be finding the mysterious, right? If we don't have God anymore, we don't have like talking Rover who's like predicting your dinner.
Yeah.
Right? Like finding like a different way of conceptualizing reality is something that seems possible.
Yeah.
Right? It's almost like what Freud's talking about.
Desirable.
Like, guess what? You have this whole rest of your iceberg unconscious.
Yeah.
Right?
That's pretty interesting.
That's pretty interesting. And maybe that's real.
Yeah.
Right? And so perhaps the desire for complexity and conceptualizing things in non-ordinary language, perhaps that's like a new quest for God in a sense, right? It's a new way of conceptualizing reality.
That's itself an interesting psychological question, right? A good one for a psychologist. Maybe someone is. I don't know about it. But is the impetus or the motivation to seek out these kinds of elegant explanations for otherwise inscrutable phenomena, the same that sort of leads us to construct fantastic tales of gods flying around in their flaming chariots in the sky.
Or I think what's even more interesting is coming up with extraordinary explanations for mundane things.
Yeah, right. How does that table exist?
Exactly.
What's the heritability of carpets?
Oh my God! With the large enough sample size, you could probably find out.
You'd probably find out. So, what did you always want to do this? Was this like you got up one morning as a junior high school kid and said, "I'm gonna be a neuroscientist / psychologist"?
I remember in high school having to take that exam that told you what profession you were supposed to be in.
And where was this, by the way? Where'd you grow up, anyway?
Mainly in Connecticut.
Mainly in Connecticut.
So
what part?
This is Fairfield, Connecticut. So, which was high school.
Mainly that's like near. Is that like near Stamford or?
Oh yeah, it's by the water.
By the water, by Greenwich.
More, it's actually more near Bridgeport.
Okay.
But I mainly grew up in Oxford. It's a small town north of there, but I lived with my grandparents for a little bit, for a couple of years of high school, to go to a slightly better high school in Fairfield.
That's why you lived with your grandparents, to go to the better high school? What did your parents do? What were your parents doing?
My father was in computers and my mother was in computers.
So and you are in computers.
I am slightly in computers, yes. Eventually, I perhaps have stopped letting them down and doing something that's real.
Uh-oh. You were letting them down?
Oh, well, we'll get to all of that later. That's definitely a couch conversation. But anyway, going back to whether I want to do all this. Deflection.
Yeah, I guess
know.
So.
I know you.
I want to pursue.
You want to go right for the analyst.
I do.
Jim Cohen, clinical psychologist.
Yep, that's right. It's like a superhero title.
Yes. So I remember in high school taking this exam, right, where you ask all these personality questions, and the little computer does its thing, and it tells you like what career you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And at that point, I thought psychological testing was the dumbest thing on the planet because I got my results. And it said, I believe, psychologist, college professor, and like something else.
Jesus Christ, bullseye.
Yeah. And it was complete bullshit because I was going to be a lawyer, right?
Lawyer. God.
And I think it's just kind of funny thinking back to that. Just like how much I complained about. I think Forest Ranger may have been the third. Not quite sure how that fits.
I identify with Forest Rangers sometimes.
Take a walk in the woods. It's kind of nice. And so it's kind of funny. So I went to undergrad. I was a computer.
Where'd you go to undergrad?
College William Mary, right here.
Oh, that's right.
Right here in Virginia.
Down the road, yeah.
I know, exactly.
I still have never been there.
Well, I told you.
I heard it's very pretty. Is it?
I'm going to be there a couple
weeks, couple months.
Month or two. You should come down.
I'll come up.
I'll have to give you a tour. Yeah. We can walk down Dog Street. Maybe it'll be
Dog Street.
Yeah, Dog Street.
Is that why dogs keep coming up today?
Presumably, yeah. Duke of Gloucester Street.
Duke of Gloucester Street.
Yes. So affectionately Dog Street. It's basically the one street in Williamsburg.
Okay. It's
where all they churn butter and the colonial people wander around.
Yeah. Good.
But hoop and stick. But so I went as a computer science chemistry double major.
Wow.
Yeah.
So why? So computer science, I get. Chemistry.
It's because it's what I was good at in high school. Right, and so you go do the thing that you're good at in high school because that's
right
what you're
away.
Supposed to
I
go
envy
do.
you almost painfully because chemistry was very hard for me.
Really?
Yeah, it was.
It's just like puzzles.
I know.
I can imagine you being good at it.
Yeah, not so much. I mean, I did it for years. I did 2 years of chemistry in college, but it kicked my ass. Man.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, I feel like we have to explore that. This isn't for this, but that blows my mind for some reason.
Well,
I mean, I hear you were soldering equipment together.
Yeah, but that's anyway.
So
you were computer science and chemistry.
Yeah,
and you did that all the way. Did you graduate with that as your majors?
I survived a semester of that.
A semester.
So,
and you went straight into college out of high school.
Yes.
Okay.
And I was always interested in a little bit of psychology, philosophy, and things like that, kind of on the side. So I.
Plus, your test told you that was what
I ignored that because that was clearly wrong. Again, reactionary. So, I took John Neslick's Intro to Psychology class my very first semester, and it was just like the coolest class. One of these just like shamanistic type,
nice,
professors.
Nice.
I think there's some. I don't know if it's still the case. There's some crazy percentage of the number of William Mary students who actually take his section of Introduction to Psychology because it's just, but it's the one I lucked into, right? Because it was 11 o'clock and I wasn't going to wake up at 8, right? So
I love I love how those kinds of considerations wind up being so consequential in our lives somehow.
Yeah, I wonder if he somehow knows that he's going to get the wacky people at 11.
Have you ever talked with him since?
Yeah, we still talk a lot. Actually, I'm looking forward to. I actually coordinated my trip back to William and Mary because he spends a lot of his time in Poland now.
Is that right?
And so I wanted to make sure that he was going to be there for the visit.
John Nislik.
Yeah, you should meet him.
I'd love to.
He's pretty fantastic.
Cool. So you took his intro class.
It was amazing. And so
you shit your pants.
Oh yeah, it was just like this was good, right?
Yeah.
This is like life is interesting. Like I thought Freud was like the shit.
Freud kind of is the shit. I mean, he doesn't have to be right.
No, but he was interesting.
Right. He was interesting and honest.
Yeah.
And painful.
Yeah.
To read.
And at that point, I decided I was going to become a psychoanalyst.
Nice.
Right.
Wow.
With like started. I mean,
well, I can see that. I think a lot of very analytical people like that approach.
Oh, it was
because
cool.
it's very deconstructive.
And again, it goes back to the idea of a bit mysterious.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
There's what your conscious
this giant
experience.
Iceberg underneath the surface that's there to explore and understand.
Yeah. No. And I think what's interesting about it, right, is that going back to what we were talking about complexity, right? You have your mundane conscious experience.
Yeah.
And there was this idea that like there was so much sitting under the surface, right? That like your conscious experience is like this end product of thousands of things going on that you have no idea.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And like
which is undoubtedly true.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And I just found that mind blowing.
Yeah.
Right. So of course
it's mind blowing.
Yeah. So I talked to John and I said I volunteered to do research with him. Of course, I said psychoanalysis. He said, how about some social? Well, actually, sorry, John, I know you're not a social psychologist. How about some personality psychology? Hoping kind of code, do data entry for him and things like that. But he really kind of took me under his wing, and
that's awesome.
It was amazing throughout the whole thing. So I switched to be a psychology major.
And so what year is this? What year? Like your junior? No, this would be right away because you only lasted.
I think I might be revealing things to my parents here if they ever listen to this. That like
you let them down sooner than they thought.
Yeah, I do. Well, I think I unofficially switched majors before I officially switched majors because I think you can continue being a computer science major but stop taking computer science classes.
Clever boy.
Yes. So I ended up doing that. At the same time, I was taking classes in religion.
Wow.
So like early Christianity, mainly because I was dating a very attractive, very religious person, and thought
that's what you got to do, man. You gotta take your lumps.
Exactly. Right. So a lot of our conversations about kind of theological issues, and I got very interested in East Asian religions.
Interesting.
So I took all the Buddhism classes, all of the.
How about that? I had no idea about this.
Yeah. So I ended up for most of my time there being a double major in religion and psychology, with taking all these philosophy classes, which
at William and Mary.
Yeah, horrifying my parents because I went there as a
that's like
very
liberal arts hippie dude.
I loved it.
That's awesome.
Oh, William and Mary was like I know I'm at UVA and I'm not supposed to be saying these things.
Yes, you are. You're
supposed
to be saying everything.
Exactly. Oh, William and Mary's just fantastic.
Oh, good.
It's so funny. I don't know how many people have gone through. Daryl Cameron just came out of there. You go through the honors theses and the master's theses. It's so many amazing how people kind of pop through there at some point or another.
Right.
But I think that it was this amazing liberal arts where you're just supposed to read literature and kind of think about religion and deconstruct religion.
Now, what time? When was this? This was the early 90s?
Yeah. So I started William and Mary in 91.
Was Michael Rohrbaugh in the? Does that name ring a bell?
That does ring a bell.
I thought he was at William and Mary at the time. He was a friend of mine.
Undergrad there?
No. He was a faculty.
In what
He
department?
wound up being in psychology. He wound up being faculty in the psych department at Arizona when I was there.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe after my time.
Yeah, maybe.
Or I may have just been oblivious.
Could have been oblivious. You're thinking about pretty religious girls.
Exactly. Well, that was but the real choice of college majors.
Right.
So, and I was really thinking psychoanalysis again for almost all of my time in undergrad, looking at these different schools of psychoanalysis that kind of exist.
Yeah.
And
you'd have been good at it.
The funny thing is I half want to still do it.
Yeah. Maybe you should.
I think it'd be kind of fun.
I wouldn't judge you.
No. And if you did,
Paul Meehl did. Paul Meehl did till the day he died. I didn't tell you. I mean, you didn't know that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Paul Meehl was a practicing analyst, old school, with the couch, sit behind the person with his paper and pencil for his entire career. He did it every Friday afternoon or Friday all day or something like that.
Well, I mean, I really believe that it's useful to explore the meaning structure, right, that you build, right? If we're serious about this idea of complexity, so much of our conscious experience is the meaning that we apply to the universe.
Yeah.
And exploring that is just
this is a
so
theme
critical.
With you. This is definitely a theme with you.
But yeah, so how to get into neuroscience and social.
Well, so you go through, you're taking all the other classes. You're going to be a psychoanalyst. So clearly you went to a grad school that was going to train you to do psychoanalysis.
Yeah, clearly. Yeah, that's exactly what Yale social psychology and cognitive neuroscience is all about.
So help me figure out how you get from I'm going to be a psychoanalyst to I'm going to join the social psych graduate program at Yale, for crying out. Yale.
Yeah. It's
I'm not
hippy dippy people.
I'm a little jealous.
Why?
I'm a little nervous because Yale is amazing. Yale social psychology.
Arizona is pretty amazing also.
Arizona, I had a great time. I loved graduate school. I loved every minute of it. But I have a hang up about the Ivies.
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
I find it
we're gonna have to say
no. We'll have to say that for later because I find it fascinating because I kind of feel like it's weird. I like to give talks wherever people invite me, right?
Yeah, me too.
And you go and you give these talks at these schools that no one's ever heard of. And everyone there's so smart.
Yeah.
Right? When you're talking,
there's smart people everywhere.
Yeah. When you're talking about the top percentage of people in a field, the differentiation between school 1 and school 3 or school 3 and school 12 is next to nothing.
Yeah.
It's all what you make of it.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So how'd you get to Yale social psych?
So I remember I was in the library waiting for...
And did you go straight over?
Oh, no.
Okay.
I had my 2.9 GPA.
2.9?
Yeah.
What? Wil Cunningham?
Oh yeah, no, that's
It's not terrible. I mean, I remember getting into a pre-med honor society as an undergraduate with a pretty crappy pre-med. My bio and chem were 2.4, 2.5.
Yeah, well,
but that was considered pretty good for that major.
Yeah, no, this was just me doing my own thing. I think that I really treated undergraduate as if I found the book interesting, I read it, and if I stopped finding it interesting, I stopped reading it. And
I'll never do anything but support that approach to life.
Or if I found a different book I was interested in that wasn't related to the class, I would. And so I think that. So to this day, I still try to figure out whether I did undergrad right or wrong, because at one level, I remember talking to my friend Dave DeRosa about this, and I remember complaining. I said, it was my third year of grad school. I was like, I think I squandered my undergraduate education.
Oh God, I know.
Right?
Me too. It's so depressing.
I took a class in cosmology. Presumably, I should know more about cosmology than I know right now. Or I took a class on Heidegger. Right? And I didn't
you did it right.
Right.
Dude.
No.
You did it the right way.
Right. But
I squandered it.
No, but I didn't read all the Heidegger. Right?
Nobody has.
Okay. Well, maybe that's the illusion.
On.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think about if I'd taken undergrad more seriously, there's all this stuff that I may have missed out. At the same time, Dave looked at me and said, yeah, and life would have been so different for you, right? So it all worked out, but I almost wish.
Well, and I bet enough of that got in that you don't really necessarily know.
Right.
So it's part of the constituent makeup of
everything.
Wil Cunningham when you are doing your fMRI analyses.
Well, exactly. And I think what I would love to do is I would love to go back and do undergrad right now. Almost even more so than go back and do psychoanalysis again.
Oh man,
I would love to do a 4-year liberal arts degree.
Oh, me too.
I would win the lottery.
God damn
take a 4-year sabbatical, do undergrad again, and come back to the university.
That. Oh my God,
read the great
books.
That
is such a good idea.
Oh, it'd be amazing.
So that's not going to happen.
Yes, but
So
there was a question you asked about how I got into this other way of doing it. I was actually in the library and waiting for someone who is perpetually late, and I have a tendency that I just have to read whatever's in front of me.
Yeah, me too. That's why the internet's been so damaging.
Oh God, yes. I read milk cartons.
Yeah,
right.
Me too. It's a sickness.
Oh yeah, and I just sat there and there was a book just kind of sitting there on that cart where they're supposed to put things back. And it was I think it was Ostrom, Hamilton, and Devine.
Really?
Right? And the title of the book was Social Cognition, Impact on Social Psychology.
Wow.
And it just happened to be the book sitting on top of the pile And so I just picked it up and I started reading the back cover and the introduction, and they were talking about unconscious processes, right? And
ding.
Yeah, all these things I thought were so cool about analysis, and I was like, you can do studies on this?
Stop it.
And it was like, that sounds kind of cool. And literally, that's when it happened. I became social cognition. This is so embarrassing. I actually got a license plate that said social cog on it. I still
fucking geek.
Okay, I still have that license plate in my office, and Marjorie Banaji has the other one apparently in her office. Virginia, social cog.
That's awesome. So how does a guy who has a 2.9 GPA and saw a neat idea on a book cover get to Yale social psych for grad school?
Well, you apply to grad school
without threats or bribes.
You apply to grad school and you don't get in anywhere, and you get to have a crisis of faith and a crisis of self identity.
Yeah,
and you get to go work minimum wage at the place that actually
good for the soul.
Good for the soul. Well, had I believe it was $12,000 a year.
Yeah,
but it had healthcare, right? So
doing what?
I was what's the exact title? Well, basically, guy in bookstore.
Guy in bookstore.
So
you're a guy in a bookstore.
Stock the books.
In Williamsburg.
In Williamsburg, right? Right on Dog Street.
So
it all comes back.
Dog Street. Dog Street's got to be a book title at some point.
It probably
probably is.
Likely. We could probably look it up later because we can read. But yeah, so I spent that.
So what was the name of the bookstore?
Rizzoli's.
Rizzoli's? It's still there?
No, it's not there anymore.
Oh, shit. I wanted to go there and
live
the Wil Cunningham
experience. The building is still there. It's just something else. But I'm going to stand there and just be in awe in a month.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, so I did this crazy thing where you could check out volumes of journals, things like that.
Uh-huh.
And if you think the other stuff was nerdy, this is going to be
This is going to blow my mind.
This is going to be you might actually kick me.
Listen carefully, kids.
You may actually kick me out of your house after this. I read section 1 of JPSP for 12 years back.
Okay, that I just about freaked out because I thought you meant that you spent 12 years
reading
section 1 of you read
12 years
back issues
of JPSP.
How
how
long did that take you?
Took me a year.
A year. That's a pretty good time.
And
you must have been reading at a pretty good clip.
Well, okay. Sometimes you don't read the whole article.
Oh, come on.
I know.
Are you
sometimes the figures are all you really need. But
fine.
But yeah, so that's where I discovered, John Barge. I discovered Russ Fazio and Marjorie Banaji.
Yeah, and didn't she wind up becoming your advisor?
She became my advisor, and so it was actually the paper that. So it was a recent article. It was the one by Irene Blair and Marjorie Banaji, where they were doing all of this kind of conscious, unconscious, automatic controlled aspects of stereotyping and prejudice.
Right. Stuff that actually matters a lot.
Yeah,
actually, that's that work.
Yeah, so Blair and Banaji, 1996. That's where I decided that seems good. And in the full context, I was reading all these books. And the great thing about working in a bookstore in a tourist place year-round is you have to spend a lot of time sitting on a chair reading.
Damn, man. Nice job.
Yeah.
Nice use of your time.
Well, unfortunately, what this means is my knowledge of social psychology is about 1982 to 1996.
and it just ends.
It's all over.
Because then you got to do your own thing.
Exactly.
You can't read anymore.
You have to do. You can't learn.
Right.
So then William Ray had a master's program, so I went to that for 2 years. And then from there.
Oh, I see. So that makes. I mean, because I was prepared. I was sitting here prepared to hear you tell a story where you just write some amazing letter to Mazarine and you have great GREs and no, this prodigy I have to.
No, I had to have the forgiveness masters.
Yeah.
But the forgiveness master and for
at William
and Mary, because luckily they actually saw the transformation, right?
Yeah,
these are people who I guess in retrospect they would tell me we saw potential in you, and why were you fucking it up?
Yeah.
Got to see me as he doesn't seem to be fucking it up anymore.
Right? Yeah, hooray!
Hooray!
Come on in, my son.
So, and I shared actually an office with Chris Preacher.
Really?
Yeah, he had the office. Yeah, right. He had the office right next to me. Well, it's not shared, but they were tiny, so I kind of consider it shared.
That's great.
Don't exaggerate too much.
Yeah, just a little.
But yeah, so then I applied to grad school, and that time I was actually able to write a personal statement talking about my ideas about,
right,
these topics.
And so, what did you do? You did a master's thesis?
Yep.
What went on?
Actually, I did it on. At that point, people kept on talking. It's funny. It's like my talk here a little bit ago, where everyone's talking about your automatic preferences and your conscious preferences.
Yeah.
Are entirely unrelated and
right.
unpredictive of each other. This was a really big idea back then.
Yeah.
And it's funny to think about my psychoanalysis way of thinking about things. That made absolutely no sense to me. That your conscious experience was not a function of your unconscious.
Right.
So it was simply just showing that the stuff was correlated if you actually modeled it statistically properly.
Well, so there's a lot of foreshadowing in the whole rest of your career.
Exactly.
Right there. Gotta model it right. Gotta do the right, model.
Yeah, and actually, that was John Neslick. I mean, he ended up being. He and Pete Dirks were my two advisors. So even then, I was a social psychology and a cognitive psychology advisor.
Nice.
And John was a modeler. Like he didn't care about social. He actually made fun of me for liking social cognition. He was like, "Wow, 2 millisecond response difference. That changes my life."
But like that whole thing.
But he was like, "Hey, if you want to model it, let's model it." And so
love it.
Yeah, he's the one who taught me to think about things numerically.
So what did you write when you wrote to Mazarine? You said, "Hey, I think I can model your thing very well."
I don't actually remember what was in that personal statement. I do remember the.
Yeah, I don't know why. I
have no idea.
I can't remember I wrote a personal statement. I can't remember.
I assume it was like halfway decent.
Please give me a position so I can stop living in a hall.
Exactly. I was living in a closet at that point, literally. Because it was a 2 bedroom with closet, and the closet was big enough to put like a twin bed in. It's cheap, but when you're making $12,000 a year. But I do remember when I did my interview at Indiana with Russ Fazio, and I look back on this. I'm trying to figure out like what response I would have if like a prospective grad student. This, I asked him for all his raw data from his 1995 paper. Because I wanted to
You wanted to model it.
I wanted to reanalyze it.
Oh God, that is so awesome. So ballsy.
So I like back.
I would have shit my pants if someone, for people out there,
don't do
interested
that.
Or
maybe do that. It was effective. Maybe
if someone wanted to analyze my data, I'd be like, yeah.
So I still
do that.
So I still have a
my
3.5.
Voice is going.
Yeah, I still have a 3.5 floppy disk.
Oh yeah, you still have it. The floppy disk.
That Ross on the second day handed me with all the raw data from his 95.
He gave it to you.
Yeah, he gave it to me the next day. So that's what I did the second night.
I love him way more now.
Oh no, he was fantastic. He was like, "Here's some data."
That is such a great story.
But it was also slightly naive too, right?
Of course it is. That's naive. It's brilliantly naive, beautifully naive. People talk about that all the time in science about how naivete is a real. Who was it? Was it Keith Dean Simonson?
Seems plausible.
Because a lot of times people come, they don't know what they're not supposed to know, or not supposed to ask, or not supposed to do, and so they wind up sort of accidentally creating a very creative, coming with a very creative idea. But you went to Yale. Mm-hmm. You got into Yale.
Yep.
Your parents happy now?
I believe so. I think they became a little more happy to start doing neuroimaging. Right, that seemed a little more real.
But that came later.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Yale not good enough.
I don't know. So
I'm not leaving it for later.
No. You're not leaving it later. I don't know. So here's one of these funny things where like
get him on the phone.
It's possible. Like it's possible that I just simply have this like neurotic personality that just kind of assumes that like I'm never good enough for anybody.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
So how much am I projecting my own self-doubt on others? Right.
Indeed. Yeah.
So
that's a good question. We should all be asking ourselves in academia.
Analysis.
Because we're all analysis is back. Maybe you should go and do some. Anyway, so you got into Yale.
Yeah.
That's pretty spectacular. Mm-hmm. That's an achievement.
Yeah.
Right away.
And it was a fantastic time. It was a really great group of graduate students there.
Yeah, because you were there with, as I've just learned, you were there with Brian Nosek and Bethany Teachman. And didn't you have share an office with Brian?
Yeah.
And who else was?
Oh my God, Greg Walton was in
Greg
that
Walton
room.
and
Tony Freitas. Oh my God, it seems like Jack Glaser was there. Buju Dasgupta. And the funny thing is, like,
substantive group.
I now feel terrible because like I'm now for all of you very famous people who I'm neglecting. I apologize. I just have like Jim staring me down, which is of course affecting my memory. So this has nothing to do with you. It's all Jim.
Yeah, as usual. Wow. So what did you do in graduate school? So you had a master's already. Did any of that count towards your graduate?
Thank
program?
God not.
Yeah. Right.
I know.
How many years were you in?
So I did Yale for 4 years and 2 years at William & Mary. So a total of 6.
Great. 4 years though.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Well, I think it's really kind of funny that all these people like want to get ahead, right? They want stuff to count.
Yeah.
Like
I took 7 years.
Yeah. Like why leave grad school early?
Oh God. If there weren't institutional prohibitions, I would recommend
still be a grad
everybody completely. Right. I mean, it is the best state of affairs. Possibly postdoc is better, but
that's
I'm
true.
not sure.
Well, postdoc you start freaking out about the job a little bit.
Yeah, that's right.
Like grad school, you don't have to start worrying about that yet.
Yeah.
You get to just go like be handheld when you need to be handheld. No one expects anything of you at some level, and
man,
you can just like be
but
upward comparison all the time.
But also the process of learning about yourself and your interests, and waking up to all of these multiple. I would call them elegances.
Yeah.
The classical test theory and item response theory.
Everything is mind blowing.
Everything is just incredible. The MTM and the devices. When John Allen and I talked about how both of us had this same experience of learning about physiology, partly through seeing the amplifiers in sort of the way that a teenage boy sees a muscle car. And like I want to use that. I want to mess with that. And all of that stuff is happening at the same time.
You take screwdrivers, start dissecting things. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I still do that.
Oh, grad school was amazing, right? So like, I show up. And I remember on the very first day of orientation, right, because they have this thing where all the faculty kind of like give it a little like spiel, right, about what they do.
Yeah.
And there's like Liz Phelps.
Yeah.
Right? And she's like, check this out. It's a picture of inside the brain. And guess what? See this thing here? It's the amygdala. I can look at the amygdala inside the brain. What,
95, 96?
97, I think. 97, 98, around that rate. And you're just like, whoa. You can look inside a brain.
I know, man. I had that. I remember. I just would shit my pants. I mean, I knew about autonomic physiology. I knew about EEG, and I knew that there were these things called MRI machines, and they could take an image. But when I learned that they could take an image of your brain doing a thing, I completely lost my shit.
I sat there. I just remember just kind of being in awe for just like her entire presentation.
Yeah,
and like. Probably like
good person to introduce you to it too.
Oh yes.
Infectious.
Yes, it's just and talking about the same types of variables, right? She's talking about automatic threat responses, and unconscious learning, and looking at the neural mechanisms that might give rise. And I was like, clearly, I have to do that.
Yeah. So did you start doing that in grad school?
Yeah, so I was working with Mazreen and Liz first doing. So actually, most of my first papers are actually with Liz.
Yeah.
And Mazreen, of course, too.
Of course. But I think in terms of content, I typically associate it with, you might say, with Mazreen.
Yeah. So, Mazreen was very heavily involved, of course. But when Liz left is when Marsha Johnson came, which is funny because
bringing in the memory piece.
Well, what's funny about that is most people don't realize how many emotion researchers were actually trained by Marsha.
Interesting.
Liz Phelps is a Marsha Johnson student.
I had no idea. Yeah. I had no idea of that.
So that actually makes Liz my mom and my sister.
Yeah. As soon as this is over, I'm going to get her on the phone, and I'm going to tell her that you said that she was your mom and your sister at the same time.
Yeah, it's
she probably liked that.
So... Yeah, when then Marsha came, I ended up being fully co-supervised, by Marsha and Mazreen.
Marsha Johnson, Mazreen Banaji, and Liz Phelps.
A little bit of Liz Phelps. That's not a bad combination. That's a pretty cool combination.
Unbelievable combination.
Yeah,
dude.
And I think so much of life
is... What are you talking about?
It's amazing. No, I mean, how much of life is, I think, recognizing opportunities where they fall in your lap.
Yeah.
Right? That's probably like 99% of success is like realizing that something has fallen in your lap and it's pretty magical.
So you go in, but you go in with this. One of the things that I've kind of lost track of it. So you started out with this interest in computing and chemistry. But you kept doing computing. You kept on
a little bit
doing some programming.
I mean, not as much as I wish I had. I feel like everything I learned back there is entirely useless, and I'm actually reteaching it to myself.
Yeah.
Because the things that they can do now
Yeah, I know. But you can. But that's what
I'm trying to pick it up again.
Yeah. So you got some computing. You're clearly good at math, so you can handle the stats, and then you blend that with this new tool that you're learning and these great influential minds.
Yeah.
And you are that is a very, very.
It's been a fantastic
fine
voyage.
Combination. So what kind of questions were you asking at that time?
Yeah, it's funny. It's always been about how the unconscious mind shapes the conscious mind.
Yeah, right.
I've always been interested
in what happens
in the link.
when they match and when they mismatch and all of these kinds of things that I know about your work. Then.
Yeah, so I mean, I think I've always been interested in like the fact that consciousness is the end product of a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And
is it like a readout?
Like
a does it sit on top as an epiphenomenon, or does it have some kind of causal?
That's a great
influence?
question.
Right?
I know, because at one level you can simply say it's epiphenomenal, but another level is we know categories are meaningful. Like once you've labeled something,
yeah, but that doesn't really solve the problem of epiphenomenon. It seems to me.
Well, the thing, I have trouble thinking that consciousness is only epiphenomenal.
Me too. In fact, I just refuse to believe that.
Yeah.
Somehow, in a very tautological fashion.
I believe it's like the last bit of magic we kind of have in some sense. So please don't take that away.
I get that.
Yeah. No, actually, honestly, you know me well enough to know if you take it away, it's gone. Curse you slightly. But I think that is this frontier, and it's amazing how we just attribute magic properties to it. Like all these dual process models, right?
Yeah.
We have the automatic stuff, and then we have the magic homunculus that I decide to do something else.
Yeah.
Right? And I just think consciousness is like the most important thing in a sense. But I don't even know how one would study it. It's
the most important thing and the most fraught thing, not only from a theoretical psychological perspective, but from a personal one.
Right.
You know, what is going to happen to me?
Right.
My eye. Oh. Where is it going to go?
So we can discuss whether there's an eye or not.
Yeah. See, right? So but I think that's why everyone, including most neuroscientists that I talk to, are at the end of the day. At the end of the day, it's not about, do you want to believe in ESP? Do you think there's a God?
Do you think there's a you?
Is there a you? Is there a self?
Right.
That
is causal.
That's causal.
Right.
Right. And that gets to questions of free will, and then pretty soon you're just like, it's time to drink.
I know, which we are doing later.
Yes, because we'll have had this conversation.
No, it'll probably continue in more depth. But yeah, so I think that's why I'm slightly interested in linking the things that we think about as being unconscious with conscious.
Yeah.
Right, because it's strangely my interest in the unconscious helps me understand what the consciousness is.
At least in terms of contents.
Yes, contents. Like at least the stuff's coming from somewhere.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And it's interesting. I never actually quite thought about the fact that this all goes back to John Neslick accidentally giving a lecture on Freud.
Yeah.
Sorry, John.
There's so many interesting things in your story, but these little points,
right?
That it could have been this way, could have been that way. The book you picked up, reading.
But that's all of life, isn't it?
Yeah. Well,
like life is full of opportunities. Like I
don't know. I mean, you said that test said you're going to be a psychologist and a professor. My mom gave me this box of old crap from high school, and as a junior in high school in one of my English classes or something, we had to make a little speech about what we were going to do when we got older. I have no memory of this whatsoever. And I look out and in my little essay that I wrote is in there, and it's, I'm going to be a psychologist.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And it talks about, all the different branches of psychology, the different areas and all. And I have no memory of that at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that just pure coincidence? I don't know.
And how old were you for that?
Probably 15.
I guess you would know what a psychologist was at that point.
No, I went to the library and looked at it. Yeah.
No, I think I can see that. I mean, you ask people a lot of. I mean, come on, think about what we're doing right now.
Yeah, and it's true.
You're bringing people in to ask questions.
I've been doing this approximately since I was 7 or 8. I don't know why. It's a compulsion to. I'm chatty, but so you're doing these. You're sort of probing the contents of the unconscious brain, mind.
Same thing.
Brain/mind. And looking at how it's associated with conscious processing. Would you say deliberate? Would you say the conscious equates to deliberate or effortful processing?
Oh, jeez. Let's see. The funny thing is that I think that's just where we probably end up with this dualistic thinking.
Yeah.
Right? We have the category A is this, and category B is the opposite of that list. The answer to that question probably really depends really on domain, right? Because I think what is effort? What is deliberation, right?
Effort is the one of the obsessions of my life.
Yeah.
What is effort?
Well, what's deliberation? It's just time on task.
Yeah.
Right?
Or the subjective feeling of doing it deliberately.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like as soon as you start invoking these terms,
yeah,
in a non,
they may be fictions,
right?
Skinner might have been right about those at least.
Well, maybe. Or, I mean, these are kind of computations, right, that happen that we ascribe some degree of homuncular, right, agency to.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that we have effort, deliberation, conscious, reflective, right, or all these controlled, terms. We link them together as kind of this magical
that's one of the things
soul
I think
that we have.
There's all this debate about depletion,
right?
And it's you periodically see the declarations that cognitive depletion is not a thing, really. Mm-hmm. Well, what about fatigue?
Is that the same thing?
Well, I don't know, but certainly they're related, right? They must be. Does it? If one thing is not real, does that mean cognitive? Mental fatigue is not a thing, or that,
Well, so my grad student sent me an article, and now this is going to be my third massive error of memory for today.
Oh, good.
Because
we'll keep them going.
Yeah, keep them going. Because I read the abstract quite clearly in the general conclusion. I looked at a couple of the figures, and I skimmed it. So I'm about to ruin some magical paper. If she hears this, she'd be like, read the paper first before talking about it. But it was talking about the way that we kind of store things in working memory. And if you have multiple things you have to hold in mind, right, what you can do is you can actually put these spatial temporal patterns, right? And if you have a certain amount of bandwidth, one way of holding multiple things in mind is segregating the bandwidth, right? So you can put things into different frequency bands, right? And that's interesting how that fits. It suddenly is a computational way of thinking about capacity.
Yeah.
Right, because your bandwidth is only so much.
Right.
And you can only fracture bandwidth so much
until everything drops below maybe some kind of threshold of function.
Yeah, you're no longer criticality anymore, right?
Yeah.
But if you're only doing one thing and you're using the whole bandwidth for one thing, right? So suddenly I start thinking things like
that's
depletion,
flow,
right?
Yeah.
You start thinking about depletion and fatigue and all these things, and rather than using these words, what if we start talking about the way that we parse bandwidth?
Did you ever read anything by Arne Dietrich?
No.
He has this whole thing about transient hypofrontality, which is why we enjoy running and doing sportsy things, because it makes our prefrontal cortex stop working, and that's awesome. But he also talks about just what you're saying, the sort of how many times can you divide what the resource is capable of doing before all of its capabilities, and that maybe the subjective experience of things like effort is just like a code.
Right.
It's like an output code, a signal that you're splitting to find.
Well, because if you think about all of cognition as being just patterns, right? Neural patterns. The more you the more you split the bandwidth, the less the fewer bits you actually have for any particular thought.
When you fold in Marcus Raichel's stuff about the sort of the relative constancy of metabolic activity.
Right.
And it's not like you can suck up more blood and glucose when you're thinking harder. You can't do that. It's all sort of the resources is what it's going to be. So what you do with it, how you parse it, how you divvy it up is that's the name of the game. It's not whether you can get more, because you can't.
Yeah. So doing that, is that control? Is that effort? Is that deliberation?
Yeah.
All of the above?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Wow.
But it's something.
So you finished up. So you did 4 years at Yale. That's it.
4.5.
And when did Mazarine go to Harvard?
The end of my second year, I think.
End of your second year.
Yeah,
and that's when you started
doing my crazy driving back and forth.
You drove back and forth to Harvard. Then you would actually. Did you have a place to live in both places?
My brother lived south of Boston. So I used to just take the train.
So you take the train up from New Haven to
Woonsocket, Rhode Island. Actually, he didn't live here.
Woonsocket?
Well, he actually lived in a town just north. It was actually Massachusetts, but I just love Woonsocket.
Woonsocket.
Woon.
Or
something. I now apologize to all people from Woonsocket.
thought you were saying womb socket, and I was like, can you say that in public?
Holy crap! Okay, so now we are learning about your mind.
Yeah, right. Yeah, forget the analyst. We're gonna leave that one alone. So do you consider yourself also a sort of product of Harvard?
Somewhat. I mean,
do you put that on your CV? I mean, it's like your degrees from Yale.
Degrees from Yale. I have a line in there that says like exchange scholar or something.
Because
like
if you put Harvard on it, then you can make $1 billion consulting to
I could also make $1 billion by pretending neuromarketing works.
Yeah, right. You can do that with Yale too, I think.
Presumably.
Sorry, was that just a Yale slight? I think that might have been a little.
No. So I chose to hear that as like Yale's good.
Good. Thank you.
So like we don't sell our no.
So that was what 2003.
2002. 2002. Well, it depends on how you count, right? Because the defense was 1 year and then the walking was another year. So depending on whether I need to be late career or early career, I changed my year of PhD.
and did you do a postdoc right after that?
I did a year and a half. Actually, I stayed with Marsh Johnson.
Okay, so at Yale, you stayed at Yale and did a year and a half postdoc. Mm-hmm. Year and a half because presumably you got a job.
Yes. Well, I got a job actually. When did I get it? Did I get it when I was still a PhD student?
In 2000.
I either got the job while still a PhD student or in the very beginning of the postdoc, and then I deferred. Okay. I know I deferred for a year.
I did that too. So where did you get your first job?
University of Toronto.
University of Toronto.
I loved it.
Yeah. Toronto, such a great city.
Oh, I
love that city. It's too cold.
Okay.
It's too fucking cold. I would never live there because of that.
Oh, I was trying to convince you otherwise, but Toronto's wonderful except for the 1 month a year it goes homicidal.
Homicidal, meaning
it tries to kill you.
It tries to kill you with the cold.
Yeah. Well, or probably deliberately.
Only 1 month?
Okay.
4.
No. The other month it's cold.
But
not like trying to actually
and
actively
what is that
kill
month?
you.
Is that February? Or
February, typically.
February is the death month. Yeah, I remember in Madison, Wisconsin, I was afraid to check my mail, go to the mailbox. What if I slipped and hit myself? The snow would be accumulating in my open, glassy eyeballs at the end of my driveway.
I was watching you guys doing your grad student recruitment this week, right? In like beautiful Charlottesville, Virginia.
Yeah,
and
it's pretty nice.
Yeah. Although I've heard this is actually unusual, to be fair.
Yeah.
Okay. But, and I thought about that, like, wow, Toronto, this beautiful, magical city that we do all of our graduate recruitment and our faculty recruitment in the homicidal month.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to sit there.
Well, then you know that you really got them.
Book, right? Oh, that's true.
That's right. Then they've passed through the gauntlet.
Yeah, they come surprised that actually leaves exist.
Right. So you got what year did you start at Toronto?
2004, 2005.
Right. About when I started here.
Yeah, exactly.
About exactly the same time.
I love how no numbers are actually accurate whatsoever.
Yeah,
they all
doesn't matter. It's like there's a confidence interval.
Yeah.
Around
it was in the
mid
2000s
because you can't remember anything anyway.
No, exactly.
I can't. I mean, especially as I get older, I'm just useless.
Well, I told you the other day. Did I tell you I misremembered my age the other week?
You did?
So I was walking into I was curious to see what the inside of a casino looked like at midnight.
Yeah.
And
you wanted to? I'm sorry. What you wanted to see what a casino looked like
at midnight?
At midnight, you never seen that before?
No.
Where were you?
I was in Niagara Falls. And I just thought it'd be fascinating. And we walked in, and the guy said,
"Some of us are fascinated by things like that." Yes, that's right.
Oh, it was so interesting.
Was it? I mean, it was one of those things where there's like no natural light and no clocks anywhere.
No, I'm just doing like almost like facial coding, right? I'm looking at like people's responses,
slack-jawed, drooling.
Or just like staring at or these people who are clearly there with fake IDs.
Oh,
right.
Really?
It was like really bimodal, the ages. But that's not. But going on in, they asked that, how old are you, right? Because obviously I'm probably not 18 years old.
And how old are you?
I'm 43.
43 right now.
But somehow, I said 34.
And
I was going up the escalator, and it was just like, wait. No, that's not right.
That's good. You're graying a little early, but you could pass for 34.
Exactly. But I love how somehow you can just like flip the actual numbers.
You know what? I still sometimes, when I'm trying to find a date really quickly, I say 19.
You're married. I mean,
19 something. I don't think 2000. That's still like
a cognitive, like there's some kind of barrier.
Yeah.
So I get a little mini P3.
Yeah.
And then before I say the 19.
Yeah.
And then I say 2005 instead of 1995 or something like that.
It's kind of strange to think like the 1900s.
Yeah, I know.
It's like
that's my life.
Hoop and stick.
Okay, so you were at Toronto, but then and what were you doing? You were continuing to do your neuroimaging work of unconscious processing and emotion. Where does emotion come in? Because at some point I met you with the emotion research group.
Yeah, that's actually Jerry Clore and Lisa Barrett's fault.
Okay, so how'd you meet those guys?
So
two of our favorite people.
They are wonderful, wonderful people.
Yeah,
adorable both.
I know.
So I was at an SPSP conference, and I was presenting in the Attitudes pre-conference, right? Because
Attitudes.
That's apparently what I do.
That's your wheelhouse,
right? And I bumped into Lisa and Jerry, and Jerry came running up. I guess he had read my iterative processing paper.
Everyone has.
And he was like, I love your emotion model. And Lisa was there, like, yeah, you should really come to the the emotion pre-conference, because like we really like your emotion model. And I was thinking to myself, like,
what emotion model?
I have an emotion model.
No, I get it though. I get it.
And so I think that it's, again, going back to my contrarian nature.
Yeah.
That ended up going to Ohio State the next year.
What? No. Why do you say this? Because of your contrarian nature? Because you loved Toronto and you're like, fuck this. I can't be in a place that I love.
No, Toronto has never been a non-loved place.
Yeah.
Well, it's about the field of study. So I was an attitudes researcher.
Okay.
And Yale, also in Toronto, and then I went to Ohio State because that's where attitude research happens.
Yeah.
And you're surrounded by like 14,000 attitudes researchers, and I was like, clearly I don't do attitudes, I do emotion.
I see. So that's where you really started taking on the identity as someone who studied emotion.
Yeah, I mean, Marilyn Brewer has the great idea of like maximal distinctiveness, right?
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
like this is a crowded playing field. Like,
yeah. Well, and that's a real thing. I mean, that makes especially for I mean, it's not just a real psychological phenomenon. It's a real thing for consideration of your career.
Yeah, no, I think that I tend to work slowly. I don't like competing with people directly. Yeah. I don't like rushing, and I just like having my own little sandbox. And I'm like, if I ever look up and I see like 14 people in my sandbox, like it's time for a new sandbox.
I totally relate to that, as we've talked about before. God damn it. Okay, so how did you? So you're there for
6 years.
6 years.
So I was Toronto for 2 years, Ohio State for six, and now I guess back at Toronto for 4 or 5.
Yeah. So 11 or 12 years total, right?
Right.
After,
yes.
So something like it must have been, and you, you're back to Toronto.
Yeah.
So what happened to the pretty religious girl at William and Mary?
Oh, she's a faculty member. Elsewhere.
She is? Elsewhere?
Yes.
Oh, to be unnamed.
To be unnamed.
Yeah, and things are on track.
In
the relationship.
Oh, you
domain.
Are definitely going analyst here. Yeah. Things are fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean. And the way I'll frame this is, as we've discussed, we lead our parallel lives.
I know.
And so what that
means, unbelievable.
Which means if you criticize my life at all, it's going to be criticism of your own life.
Which gets into many wheels within wheels of analysis now.
Yeah, and this is fantastic because like this is one of these great things where like we're obviously not going to go into this, and we're just going to leave this as like this, what's this mysterious symbiosis?
We've had our relationship issues, haven't we?
Yeah, we have, and
we sure have.
And I believe your life is pretty fantastic now as well,
yes,
right?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like so now everyone's gonna wonder like, what's with Will and Jim? What's going on in their lives?
I tell people that Wil Cunningham is my karmic doppelganger.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in many ways.
Yeah.
Although I missed out on Yale and Harvard. That I didn't get to do that.
Well,
but with everything else, we've basically done the same stuff. Right down to playing the bass guitar, we learned.
That's right. That's right.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, we pretty much have like the identical partners now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's insane.
It is super insane.
Yeah, man. All right. Well, I think we're gonna wrap it up. That's awesome time. Thanks.
That's been fantastic.
Thanks for talking with me.
Awesome. Good seeing you.
Shut that one down.
I know. I love this whole like goodbyes. We're gonna hang out the rest of the evening.
Yeah, we're gonna hang up. Yeah, I know. Let's go drink.
Exactly.
Okay. Bye bye. Okay. That's it. That's enough of that. Thanks to my buddy and my sort of karmic doppelganger, Wil Cunningham, for being such a sport and for keeping me on my toes, man, during that one. I can't wait to do that again. And, I might just give him a call right after recording this, right now, because I can. And I kind of want to. He'll probably pick right up and tell me he can't talk right now. But then I'll call him later and it'll all be good. Anyway, dear listeners, the music on Circle of Willis is written by Tom Stouffer and Gene Rulli and performed by their band, the New Drakes. For information about how to purchase their music, check out the About page at circleofwillispodcast.com. And don't forget that the Circle of Willis is brought to you by VQR and the Center for Media and Citizenship at the University of Virginia. And that the Circle of Willis is a member of the Teej FM network. You can find out more about that at teej.fm. And if you like this podcast, how about giving us a little review down there at iTunes and letting us know how we're doing. It's super easy, and we like it. We do. Or you can send us an email by going to circleofwillispodcast.com and clicking on the Contact tab. It's pretty easy, too, and we'd love to hear from you if you have any reactions to what we've been talking about, anything that bothered you, anything you just want to say, give us a verbal high five. Just do it. In any case, I'll see you all at episode 5, where I talk with Lisa Feldman Barrett of Northeastern University about her view of emotion, a view that has caused a lot of us to completely rethink what we thought we understood. Until then, bye-bye.